The day my son-in-law looked me in the eyes and said, "Sell me your house, or you'll lose your daughter," I felt the air leave my lungs. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten me with anger. He smiled as though he had already won. I looked at my daughter, Emily, hoping she would stop him, but she lowered her eyes and stayed completely silent. That silence hurt more than his words ever could. If emotional family stories with meaningful life lessons speak to your heart, I'd truly appreciate you subscribing to Behind Dad. Before we continue, I'd also like to mention that the pictures shown throughout this story are artistic visual recreations designed to help tell these memories. They are not actual photographs from my family's life. The house he wanted wasn't just another piece of property. My late wife and I had spent 35 years paying for it. Every wall held memories of birthdays, family dinners, and Christmas mornings. After my wife passed away, that house became the last place where I still felt close to her. Selling it had never been part of my plans. Yet there sat my son-in-law, Ryan, talking about it as if it were already his. Ryan claimed he wanted to expand his business and believed buying my home below market value was the perfect opportunity. Then he leaned closer and quietly said that if I refused, he would make sure Emily stopped visiting me altogether. I looked at my daughter again, searching her face for some sign that she disagreed. Instead, she whispered, "Dad, maybe it's time to move on." Hearing those words felt like losing my family for a second time. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply smiled, thanked them for visiting, and walked them to the front door. Ryan looked satisfied, convinced my silence meant I would eventually give in. He had no idea that my quiet smile wasn't surrender. It was patience. Exactly 1 month later, while I was drinking my morning coffee, my phone stayed completely silent. Instead, the bank called Ryan, and by the end of that conversation, he finally discovered who truly owned everything he thought he was about to take from me. The month passed quietly. I never mentioned the house again, and Ryan seemed to mistake my silence for weakness. Emily stopped calling as often. Every evening, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the photographs of happier days, wondering how my little girl had drifted so far away. I missed her terribly, but I refused to let fear make my decisions. My wife used to tell me that the truth always reveals itself if you're patient enough to wait. I held on to those words every single day. One Monday morning, while I was making coffee, my attorney called to let me know that Ryan had officially applied for financing to purchase my home. I wasn't surprised. Months earlier, he had assumed I would eventually give in and had already started making plans. What he never knew was that I had quietly placed my family assets into a legally structured trust years before my wife passed away. I had done it to protect our retirement and make sure no one could pressure either of us into decisions we didn't truly want to make. An hour later, my attorney forwarded me a short message from the bank. Ryan's application couldn't move forward because the property wasn't mine to sell as an individual. The trust owned it, and its terms clearly prevented any forced or below-market transfer. According to my wife's written instructions, the house could only be sold if an independent trustee confirmed the decision benefited me alone. No one, not even family, could pressure me into signing it away. That afternoon, Ryan received the same explanation from the bank. Instead of calling me, he spent nearly an hour arguing with loan officers, convinced there had been a mistake. There wasn't. Then my phone finally rang. It wasn't Ryan. It was Emily. Her voice was trembling. She quietly asked, "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me Mom created a trust before she passed away?" Before I could answer, I heard Ryan shouting in the background, demanding to know what other secrets I had been keeping. At that moment, I realized this conversation wasn't really about the house anymore. It was about something much deeper that neither of them had expected to uncover. I asked Emily to come over alone. For a long time, she sat across from me without saying a word. She looked exhausted, nothing like the cheerful little girl I had raised. Finally, tears rolled down her face. She admitted that Ryan had never wanted the house because he loved our family home. His business was drowning in debt after a series of risky investments. He believed buying my property far below its value and using it as collateral would solve everything. When I refused, he convinced Emily that I was being selfish and standing in the way of their future. Hearing that broke my heart, not because of the house, but because my daughter had been carrying someone else's fear instead of trusting her own father. I walked to the bookshelf and took down an old photo album. We turned the pages together, stopping at pictures of birthdays, camping trips, and the day Emily learned to ride her bicycle. I reminded her that every promise I had ever made to her, I had kept. If I protected this house, I quietly said, it wasn't because I loved a building more than my daughter. It was because your mother and I promised to protect this family's future, even when the hardest person to protect you from was someone you loved. Emily lowered her head and admitted something she had hidden for months. Ryan had been making financial decisions without telling her. Credit cards were maxed out, loans had been taken in both their names, and collection notices had already started arriving. She wasn't asking me to save the business anymore. She was asking for help escaping the lies. I held her hand, realizing she wasn't choosing between me and her husband anymore. She was choosing between truth and fear. Just then, my attorney called again. Ryan had submitted documents to another lender claiming he already had permission to purchase my home. The lender had discovered serious inconsistencies and referred the file for further legal review. I closed my eyes for a moment. I never wanted revenge against my son-in-law, but I knew the truth had finally reached the people who needed to see it, and Ryan's next phone call would change all of our lives forever. The next morning, Ryan called me for the first time without anger in his voice. He sounded defeated. The lender had rejected his application, and investigators wanted answers about the inaccurate financial information he had submitted. For a moment, I remembered the confident man who had once demanded my home as though it already belonged to him. Now all I heard was fear. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I simply told him the truth. You never lost because of the trust. You lost the moment you believed pressure was stronger than honesty. Later that afternoon, Emily came home with a small suitcase. She had decided to leave Ryan until he accepted responsibility for everything he had hidden from her. It wasn't an easy decision. She cried for hours, wondering whether she had failed her marriage. I reminded her that loving someone doesn't mean protecting their lies. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is step away until the truth has room to grow. Together, we met with financial advisors and attorneys to separate the debts she never knowingly agreed to and begin rebuilding her future one honest step at a time. Months passed before Ryan reached out again. This time, he wasn't asking for my house. He apologized for trying to manipulate me and admitted that pride had nearly destroyed everything that mattered. I accepted his apology, but I also explained that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Trust is rebuilt through consistent actions, not emotional promises. He nodded, understanding that some lessons take years to earn. Today, I still live in the same home where my wife and I built our family. The walls hold different memories now, not just of joy, but of resilience. My daughter visits every Sunday, and together we remember that love should never be controlled by fear or money. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments because your experience may encourage someone facing a difficult family situation. Share this story with someone who needs the reminder that integrity is worth more than any property. Thank you for spending this time with me on Behind Dad. The greatest inheritance you can leave your family is not a house or money, but the courage to choose truth even when it costs everything.